What's up, collective? I am about to get categorized by many of you by what I'm about to tell you, and I want to start off this morning by confessing to you that I like CrossFit. All right? Back in 2018, I know I just jumped into two very distinct categories. Back in 2018, I got invited by my buddy Clint, who owned the gym that I was going to at that time, to compete in my first CrossFit competition. And I was really honored that he asked me to do it because Clint's a phenomenal athlete. I hadn't been doing CrossFit, but maybe about 9 months or so. And so it was a real honor that he asked me to be a part of his team. And, I don't know what you know about CrossFit, but I can sum it up like this. It's dumb. Right? They do really insane workouts, and then they pretend to like it. And normally we do like one a day, but a CrossFit competition, there's like 3 or 4 of them like backed up on top of one another. And so they released the workouts. The first 2 workouts had like cool, flashy moves, so I spent time preparing and practicing those. The third workout was just going to be a grind. And it just wasn't anything like fun. It wasn't anything worth, so I didn't spend any time preparing for it. I want to show you this workout real quick. This is the third workout, okay? And I'm just going to briefly describe it. It starts with 90 wall balls, right? When there was two males, 2 females, and the male and female had to go at the same time. It started with 90 wall balls, where you take a 30-pound medicine ball, you squat, you stand up, and you throw it to hit a mark at the 10-foot mark. Then you got to catch it, and you got to go back down, and you got to do that 90 times. In order for the rep to count, the male and the female had to be synchronized together. And then from there, we go to 30 box jumps. Now, this was the only part of this workout where all 4 athletes were going at the same exact time. And in order for the rep to count, all 4 of you had to be standing on the top of the box at the same time. And then the workout goes on. We're not going to go through the rest of it, but basically it just repeats that stupidity for, the rest of the workout. Now, what makes Clint so good is he's done it a long time, and he always has a good game plan going into the workout based on that team's weakest link. And so before this workout, the day of the competition, we circle up, and Clint says, the most difficult part of this workout is going to be the box jumps. And immediately in my head, I go, wrong, right? Do you not see the rest of this workout, Clint? And then Clint goes in our team meeting, turns to me, and he goes, Curtis, you will set the pace on the box jumps, which means, in Clint's mind, I am the weakest link. And so now I'm offended. And I look at Clint and I said, Clint, I'm not worried about the box jumps. I'm worried about everything else in this workout. And he says, I need you to focus on the box. And I said, dude, I'll be fine there. And then he says, I think we're going to struggle, especially you. So now I'm indignant. And I look at him, I say, Clint, I promise you we will cruise through those. And he's like, I don't think so. Either way, just know, Curtis, you can set the pace there. So the workout starts, and I'm happy to let you know, I've got a picture to prove it, that workout was exactly like I said it would be to Clint. I'll give you one guess who the guy bent over the box is about to blow chunks. That's right. I'm generally a pretty positive person, but in that moment I was thinking 2 things. How do I not puke in front of all these people? And secondly, how am I going to finish this? Because I don't think I can. I never thought that this would be the thing that would kick my butt. I never thought that this would be the most difficult part. And this moment now reminds me of a truth that we find in the Bible in Proverbs 29:23, which says, pride ends in humiliation, while humility brings honor. Never underestimate the wisdom of someone who has already been there. Now, maybe this isn't a thing for you. If that's the case, that's awesome. But my guess is for most of us in the room, we've had more than one moment, maybe multiple moments like this in different areas of life. Right? We've been there, and you've experienced one of these oh crap moments, these lessons that all of a sudden become so ingrained in you because you realize, I should have paid attention. Right? I wish I would have listened. I never thought that this would be the thing that would get me. And the real difficulty about each of these moments is that once you find yourself bent over a box about to blow chunks, it's really difficult to keep going. right? Once you find yourself in this oh crap moment, it's really difficult to get through. And what can happen is the thing that you thought you didn't need to spend time on can actually become the thing that crushes you. And this is why, if we want to be a church of blood-stained pews where we are real about our lives, we have got to be a place where we can be real about our mental health. You see, it has been my experience, and I'm emphasizing that this has been my experience, that we do a really good job of talking about and hearing about and asking for help in many different places in life. It seems easier to admit, I need financial help, I need relational help, I need dating help, I need marriage help, I need parenting help, I need addiction help. I didn't say it was easy, I said it's easier. Right? And each of those different areas carry a little bit of a stigma with them, but the one that seems to have a lingering, souring, scary impact is admitting mental health. The I need help with me.
Really growing up, church was a big part of my identity. I wanted to be a good Christian so badly. I was so scared of messing up. I remember when I was a child, and especially as a teenager, I started to feel at times, hopeless and worried all the time. And I remember, going to youth pastors or people that I trusted within the church to ask them how to navigate through those feelings. And the answer was always the same. Hey, you should pray more. You should read your Bible more. And ultimately, the thing that was told to me the most was I needed to have more faith. The problem was I really truly leaned into that, and I believed that that's what I was supposed to do to overcome these feelings of hopelessness and worry and doubt. But the more I leaned in, the more those feelings were there. They didn't go away. So even though I understood grace and I understood that I didn't need to beat myself to death to be perfect, to check all these boxes so that those feelings would go away, I still didn't really know what to do with them because the church didn't really talk about mental health, right? So I got really good about hiding what I was feeling and what I was going through. I got really good at pretending everything was okay. I got good at hiding behind, laughing and jokes and just being goofy. It kind of just became who I was, but in reality, I was hiding a lot of pain. Later, Shelby and I would go through a lot of church hurt, especially around ministry. And while that was really hard, I took the approach of, I have to be strong for her. And even in that, feeling like something that I was called to in ministry was ending, I just buried that down and I went to work and I was strong for her. It wasn't until we found out that we were pregnant that things started to really change for me. I had always wanted to be a father, and I was so excited that we were pregnant, and I was even more excited when I found out that we were having a son. But soon that excitement about being a father took a turn for me, and I vividly remember one night, Declan and I went and got dinner together. It was just me and him. We went and got tacos, and we went to an arcade. We're laughing and having a great time. But in a moment, just like that, it went from being happy to being depressed. And I didn't really know what was going on. It just kind of hit me, and I fell into this pit, is what I would call, of despair, and all of these thoughts about how I'm not doing enough, I'm not a good father, you're going to screw up, you're going to mess up, just started flooding into my mind. And I remember when I finally broke down and told Shelby what was going on, she obviously encouraged me that I was being a good father, and then she encouraged me to look into therapy. Therapy was not something that was talked about in my family. It's not something that was talked about in church for me growing up. My experience at church viewed therapy as something that was not godly or not, accepted within the church. You either needed more faith or you were crazy. And as terrible as that sounds, that was truly my baseline of what therapy was. So it took a while, but I got paired with a therapist, and he's amazing. I was diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and PTSD. That was a hard thing to admit, but knowing what was going on for me empowered me more to lean in and to dig deep and to deal with those things. I could choose to be angry and bitter and not lean into healing and restoration. That would be the easy path, but I've chosen the hard path to say, now that I know I can deal with these things, and now that I know there can be healing for me, there can also be healing in my relationships as well, and I want to pursue that. But I understand that our culture does not really leave a lot of space for men to be vulnerable. In March of this year, I lost my friend Will. I first met Will when he invited me and other neighbors over to his house to try out his extensive collection of whiskey and to watch some football, and of course to talk about Alabama, Roll Tide. Will was very generous, one of the most generous people I've ever met. Anyone and everyone was welcome into his home multiple times a week. He's very kind with the children. He even dressed up as Santa on Christmas Eve and knocked on the door and delivered some early Christmas presents to Declan and Caroline. And that was really awesome. But on March 11th, while I was traveling for work 4,000 miles away in Germany, I got the call that Will took his life. Having to grieve alone so many miles away across the world. I just had so many questions that still haven't been answered, and I realized that they probably never will be answered. It's hard not to think about every conversation, interaction I ever had with Will, to see if there's something that I just missed. There were no signs, and I often think about how as men we do a really good job at hiding everything that we're going through. And it just has to change. When you ask a man how he's doing and he says, "I'm fine," he's probably not. But maybe he's too afraid to tell you how he's really feeling. Or maybe he doesn't have the tools to even put to words what he's going through. And so I think our culture has to change. We have to allow space for men to be vulnerable about what they're going through and open about what they're going through without judgment, but rally around them in community. I know that for myself, the turning point for me was when I decided to get serious about my mental health. But it was that initial fear of taking that step that held me back for a long time, and I'm so glad that I took that step and I made that decision. But I think it's time that we change the narrative. It's time that we change the culture, especially within churches, to handle this topic properly. Paul said in Galatians 6:2 to share in each other's burdens. I wonder what it would be like today if those kinds of conversations where men are able to freely be vulnerable and open about what they're going through, if that was just a part of life and normal. I wonder who would still be with us today.
Would you do me a favor and encourage Dan for sharing his story and heart with us this morning? So this is a series that's centered around the idea that we want to be a church where we can be real and we can talk about where we're hurting, right? Where we are metaphorically, but literally, bleeding. And when we're willing to admit that in front of one another, right, it's in that place that we can begin to find healing. And that is going to be what helps us change the narrative like Dan was talking about. Because we realize we are not alone. I want you to write that down. I am not alone. According to a new poll released by Morning Consult on behalf of the American Psychiatric Association, over 60% of people surveyed say faith plays an important role in their mental health. But of that 60%, only 52% say that their faith community talks about mental health openly and without stigma. right? It's pretty good, but we still got a lot of work to do. And 68% of those who claim a faith would be willing to reach out for mental health care if a religious leader in their community would recommend it. I know we've not been here very long. I don't know if you see me as a leader yet, only a couple months, but just in case you're not sure, I recommend it. Here at Collective, we're challenged all the time to read our Bibles, and I want to show you one of the reasons why. Here's just a few of the times that we see what is likely considered mental health struggles in the Bible. A guy named Job, Michael talked about him last week. Deep depression in life and a feeling of hopelessness. A man named Jonah gets so bitter and dark about God's plan that he asks God to end his life. King Saul had a deep mental battle that appeared like some form of bipolar disorder, suffering from extreme paranoia and volatile mood swings. King David struggles to even get out of bed in a couple of the lowest seasons of his life. And Hannah, who was in such deep despair that she was described from a distance as weeping bitterly, not sure she could even get up. And these were not just passing moments, these were long seasons, in most cases years of these people's lives. The Bible is not silent about this topic, and so we will not be silent. This morning I want to focus on one story about a guy named Elijah today. Now the setup for this story is a little bit different because it's out of the Old Testament and people related to the world around them significantly different than we do today. So God tended to show up in different ways, in ways that we're not used to, right? But when we jump into Elijah's life right here, everything's going right for him. He really should have reason to be celebrating. He should be celebrating. And I know this is a little odd. It's not missed on me. But Elijah just walked out the other side of proving that God exists to a bunch of people. There's the Canaanite people and the Israelite people. And the Canaanite people have been influencing the Israelite people to worship a god named Baal, a god of the storms. And the way that you would worship Baal is you would sacrifice your babies to him. And Elijah shows up and's like, hey, you should stop. God doesn't want you doing that. And they're like, we'll show you. And so they challenge to this match where they're like, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to call down fire from heaven, from Baal, and we'll show you that God is real. And Elijah goes like, all right, let's do it. So the priests of Baal go to work and they pray for hours on end. Nothing happens. Elijah steps on the scene, prays a 4-sentence prayer to God, and all of a sudden, boom, fire shows up. There's kind of a quick celebration, and Elijah thinks everything's going to be good from here, except that's not what happens. Elijah expects all the people to turn back to honoring God, but instead, they get angry at him, put a hit out on him, and Elijah goes on the run, and this is where we pick up the story for today. 1 Kings 19, verses 3 and 4, it says this, Elijah was afraid, and he fled for his life. He went to Beersheba, a town in Judah, and he left his servant there. Notice, he immediately alone. Then he went on alone into the wilderness, traveling all day. He sat down under a solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors who have already died. This is why it's important we talk about mental health. Yes, Christians can and do struggle with mental health. People need to know that they are not alone, and you can still be a Christian and struggle to feel hope. Pastor Tony Rose said, a depressed person is convinced no one has felt the way that they feel. He goes on to say, he said, do not buy into the lie that depression only affects the weak. Some of God's greatest servants face this darkness. There are no exceptions. Everyone is susceptible to the enemy's weapon. Elijah, who is a hero in the Bible, and he finds himself there. And so if you are here today, right, and maybe you've never put words to this, but you're carrying shame because the word struggle doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of what's going on inside of you, I want you to hear you are not alone. You don't need to feel shame because it feels like your mind is at best playing tricks at you and at worst is raging against you. You are not alone. If you have thought, I wish it would just end, you do not have to feel alone in this church. Those of us who have felt that way, we are in good company. Elijah, one of the greatest men of God to ever live, was there. Your dark thoughts are not too dark. Your struggles are not too messy. Elijah's story goes on in verse 5. It says, then he laid down and he slept under the broom tree. But as he was sleeping, an angel touched him and told him, get up and eat. He looked around, and there beside his head was some bread baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And so he ate and drank and lay down again. Then the angel of the Lord came again and touched him and said, get up and eat some more, or the journey ahead will be too much for you. So he got up, and ate and drank, and the food gave him enough strength to travel 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. There he came to a cave, and he spent the night. Right, there are some who say about this story that God gave us this story in our Bibles to show us that sometimes the best thing you can make sure to do is eat a good meal, drink some water, and take a good nap. Now, I recognize how trite that can sound to someone who's in it. But I do want to show you, we've got to take an honest look at this. Look what research shows. According to multiple research institutions, the NIH, Harbor Psychiatry and Mental Health, CERN, just to name a few, the number one thing you can do to improve your mental health is get high quality, not quantity, high quality sleep. Closely followed by that is your diet and some form of exercise. And so I want to ask the question this morning, honestly, right? What part of this do you need to wrestle with? Right? Your sleep diet, your eating diet, your technology diet. It isn't everything when it comes to your mental health, but I want to show this picture again. We've got lots of good, smart people telling us to pay attention to our sleep, our nutrition, exercise, and what we give our attention to, news, social media. For us to just blow by that is foolish. And so the first thing I want us to get real about as we're talking about mental health is we need to be real about what we are consuming. We need to be real about what we are consuming, right? Super practical thing. High fruits, vegetable, grains, and lean proteins diet is essential to help you function, but I'm not just talking about what you eat. We've got to talk about the fact that you're not sleeping because you're up late working or scrolling. We've got to talk about that you're binge watching a show while consuming that third glass of wine, that third beer, that third shot, that third mixed drink. We got to talk about the fact that you spend more than 2 hours a day on a screen outside of work hours. Right? Studies by the NCBI and NIH show it's like, man, we started looking at all these things, it's like, dang. But if we're going to be real about this, we've got to listen to people who have been there before. We can ignore it and do our own thing, but then we just have to admit we're setting ourselves up to not be successful. And that's not the only thing that we can learn from Elijah's story. Look at what else. And this is where I think really becomes the difference maker for Elijah. Verse 9 says, there he came to a cave where he spent the night. But the Lord said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? Elijah replied, I have zealously served the Lord God Almighty, but the people of Israel have broken their covenant, broken their promise with you, torn down your altars, and killed every one of your prophets, and I am the only one left. And now they're trying to kill me too. First thing I want you to notice about this is God does not make Elijah feel dumb, weak, incompetent, silly, right? About what Elijah's feeling. God shows up and he simply wants to know about Elijah. What are you doing here? What has led you to this place where you are right now? And God's not talking about a physical place, or at least I don't think God's talking about a physical place at all, because I think God's talking to him like mentally, because look at how Elijah responds. Elijah checks in with what exactly is going on and how it makes him feel. Elijah doesn't ask God for anything. He tells God about himself. And that's our second thing for today, is we need to be real with God. Echoing an application from Michael last week. My wife is a public high school teacher, and often she needs to go to personal development days, that she doesn't often enjoy, but every once in a while, she loves one. She comes home and she shares it with us as a family. And a few years ago, she came home with one that has quickly become a family staple. And it's cheesy, it's simple, but man, has it been so good for me personally, for me and her, also for our kids. And I can't encourage you enough to go home and do this for yourself, right? To do this with a significant other if you have one, to do this if you have kids, specifically sitting in the car or at the dinner table. You might think it sounds silly, but it's pretty remarkable. This is what it's called. It's called High-Low Buffalo. And the check in with High-Low Buffalo. And so here's what it is. It's the three things from your day that you check in about. Your high, this is easy. Your best, your coolest part of your day. The low, the worst, sad, difficult part of your day. And then the buffalo, it's just the surprise, because, why not, right? Buffalo. This is what surprised you. This could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. And here's this deal. This, right? Just taking time in your day to check in with what was the high, what was the low, what maybe surprised you, and what feelings did that bring up. That keeps you from just blowing past the emotions of your day. Now, and look at how Elijah does this. It wasn't until the 11th hour that I realized Elijah does this. In verse 10, look, Elijah replied, I have zealously served the Lord God Almighty. That's his high. But the people of Israel have broken their covenant with you. They've torn down your altars and killed every one of your prophets. That's his low. His buffalo, I am the only one left. And now they're trying to kill me too. I really thought all of that, hype and fire and stuff like that was going to make a difference, God, but instead they still turned on me. And so my challenge for you is with each other, with God, is to check in with High-Low Buffalo. Check in with someone else. Right? This is something that you could do just on an 8-minute phone call, which studies have shown can pull you out of despair feelings and reset the neurons in your mind, just connecting for 8 minutes with a friend about what's going on. This is small, and it may seem trivial in light of the heaviness of those who have walked down this path with someone. But once again, this has been my experience that what we tend to do, especially as men, is we blow by our emotions because it seems weak, and to be honest, we've got too much other crap to do to spend time feeling about it. But just like 30 box jumps is nothing by itself, you stack that on top of 90 wall balls, and all of a sudden, they're a real contender at raising your heart rate too high and making it physically impossible to keep going. Listen to me. Never taking time for the simple act of acknowledging what's going on in your life, especially with the bad, adds up, and it will overload your soul. We have got to check in. And part of getting real with God is admitting that you can't do it on your own. Right? For some of you in the room, getting real with God is by finally saying, I'm ready to jump all in following Jesus. I'm ready to let Jesus begin to call the shots in my life. I've messed up, but I'm not giving up, and so I'm going to start following Jesus. And the best first step for that is baptism. If that's you, mark on your Connect card, and we will follow up with you this week about what that's all about and why that first good step is baptism and beginning to follow Jesus. By ending you trying to do this on your own, right? We have to end trying to do this on your own, in your way. It's going to be the first step to get back to the place where you feel strong. Now, the beauty of how this section of Elijah's story ends is that God does directly answer him back. Right? The last thing that we can learn from this part of Elijah's story is that you've got to be around good, godly people. You've got to get around good, godly people. And so the last thing is be real with your community. Right? Dan talked about it in his video. I'm fine. Well, you've got to have a community that you can be real with. Because we see it, and when we read Elijah's story, it's like we notice it, and yet we do it in our own lives all the time. Right away at the beginning of where we talked about Elijah's story today, we notice like he isolates himself. Elijah isolates himself, sits down under a tree, and then he highlights to God that he is the only one left who cares. And in Elijah's world, that's what he sees. And the first thing God does, besides engage him in conversation, why are you here, Elijah? The first thing that God does is when we read out the end of the story, God encourages him to get back around people. God actually puts him out on mission, and one of these people he ends up connecting with is a man named Elisha, Elisha, who becomes Elijah's apprentice and closest friend. Now here's the deal. I can't guarantee you that you will make your closest friend here at Collective. But we do have resources that we want you to know about and to help you because your mental health matters to us. One of the best ways that you can plug into this is to download the Church Center app and click the mental health tab on the screen. I did my best to circle it in yellow there for you. And there is a bunch of resources that we've collected as a church so we can help get you connected, right? We want to get you connected to this church, but we also want to help get you connected to a professional. Now, it hit me just a couple weeks ago how much it means to have a church to call home. Do you know a church that is full of people who are in it and fighting alongside of you? It's from where my family and I live down in Charlestown, West Virginia, where we're going to be planting a church. It's about a 35 to 40-minute drive, kind of depends on how you catch the lights, to get here every morning. And a couple weeks ago, our second daughter, my daughter KJ, made it here without any form of shoes on. Yeah. And so what we did is we came into service. My wife let her borrow, my daughter borrowed my wife's shoes. She went into service at Collective Kids, and then my daughter KJ was just going to stay with me, and my wife would get her shoes back, and she would go serve at Collective Kids the next service. Now, during that service, we were outside talking to people, and my daughter KJ came running up to me, and she told me that she needed to go use the bathroom. So I told her to go inside, use the bathroom, and then to come back outside and find me so that I know, where she is. And we're talking and I'm sharing stories with different people, and we're just, connecting, catching up. And time goes by, and time goes by, and time goes by, and I realize, where's KJ? And so I start to go look, and I go on the hunt for her, and I'm circling around. I come inside to the lobby. I go back outside. I come back inside to the lobby, and I'm going on the hunt. I can't find her anywhere. I happen to see my wife, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I can't admit to her that I potentially lost our daughter, and so I'm like, "Oh, nothing." And so when I circle back around the second time, she knows something's up, right? And I'm like, can't find KJ, And she's like, "What?" And so they're going on the hunt, but I'm not wanting to tell anybody. And I've not been here long, but I've been here long enough that the safety and security team have known that I don't just pace through the lobby inside and outside with a panic look on my face. And so they're asking me "Curtis, is everything okay?" And I don't want to look like a fool. And so I don't tell them. And I keep walking, and finally they press on me just enough, and I realize because things are starting to run through my mind about how could I have lost my daughter. I'm picturing someone running off with her. And they ask again, "Curtis, is everything okay?" And I said, "I can't find my daughter." and they hit the radio, and in what felt like seconds, they found her 25 feet up in one of the pine trees outside. Barefoot, nonetheless. And that is why we moved to West Virginia. But look, guys, look. If you've got to go out of here with one thing today, go with this. You are not alone. You don't have to be afraid to say, I need help. And that's just a small snippet of the community that we want to be and are here at Collective. It is one of, if not the biggest reason why we stress the importance of being here each and every week. You are not alone. You do not have to be afraid to say, I need help. Let's pray. God, we love you. God, thank you that you're a God that we could just run to, God, and a simple prayer, we could say, God, I need help. God, would you surround us, God, with good, godly people? God, would you help us to be the good, godly people? God, would you help us to not just blow by our everyday and the feelings that stack up, but God, would you tune us into them and help us to be able to hand them off to you in a way that makes a difference? God, I don't know what trust looks like in each and every moment in our individual lives, but God, would you help us to lean into and trust you with our heart, with our soul, with our strength, God, and with our mind. Thank you so much for Jesus. It's in your Son's holy and awesome name we pray. Amen.